clarity. Okay, we're going to talk about demand planning. And demand planning is the same thing as forecasting. It's just a little bit different. Okay, so let me just switch this to one of our older slides. Here we go. Demand planning is two parts. Planning is really both forecasting and managing customer demand. So demand management is another term. And what we're trying to do is reach our operational and financial goals. In other words, we're trying to determine how many things should we make. So how many products should we make? How many things should we sell? How many services should we offer for a certain time period, let's say for the month? I don't know. Demand forecasting is predicting future demand. So I'm forecasting, a fortune teller, I'm going to envision, here's what my future is going to be. Here's what I'm going to plan to make, right? So looking at previous data, I'm going to try to pretend and understand exactly what I need to make, how many items I need to make. Demand management is influencing a pattern of demand or consistency of demand. So demand management is proactive. You actually can manipulate your demand. And we do this very easily through pricing. So if I lower my prices, my demand will go up. People will want to buy more because it's cheaper. And especially if there's interest in the product, right? So I can intentionally lower my price to increase demand. The problem is if I increase demand by lowering my price, I don't maximize my profit, my revenue. And this is not good for me. Now, the other way I can manage demand is I can influence the supply. So if I can limit my supply, I can say, here's my supply. You can buy this product while it's available, but it's only available for a limited time. Once it disappears, it's gone forever. So act now and buy the product at the price that I want you to pay so that you can get in on this. Now, it doesn't happen anymore because of streaming video, but Disney was phenomenal for this. You may have remembered that Disney would have movies they would release on a certain time period, and then when it wasn't released, it wasn't available, it went back into the vault. Well, what is the vault? Is the vault a physical building underneath Walt Disney World? No, it just means it's going back into its warehouses. Now, the demand would increase demand because while that Disney video, let's say 101 Dalmatians, is available, you can go ahead and buy it at the $26.95 price or whatever. And then once that time period is over, Disney actually buys back all the 101 Dalmatians videos, DVDs, back from the stores like Walmart and Target and Meijer. And once they buy them back at a lower discounted rate, but it's no longer available for you, which inadvertently creates a third market like eBay. And people can inflate the price up, say $50 to $100 for a video when it's not available from the normal market. But that's a conversation for another day. But that's demand management. We're playing around with the demand that people have because either limited availability, so we're playing with the supply, or we're playing with the price. Bring the price down and demand goes down. Sometimes you want to bring your price up because you know you're not going to be able to satisfy all the demand that's available. So if I inflate my price, then people are not willing to buy it immediately. And because of that, again, I'm playing around with my demand. So forecasting is planning for the future, not playing any games. Management is actually manipulating your demand. Okay. Probably it's important to mention at this point that there's two different types of demand. One is called independent demand. Every time we talk about demand here, demand in Econ 115, demand in Accounting 221, talking about demand in Business 101, Business 102, we're talking about independent demand, which is out of the box, right? So if I take this bottle of water that I have, this bottle of water is independent demand. This is one, right? So I've got one unit of independent demand. Dependent demand is dependent upon the independent demand. Now, can't make that any more confusing, I don't think. Dependent demand depends on the bottle of water. And what this is raw materials that are individually make up this bottle of water. So here I've got the plastic bottle, I've got a label, I've got a cap, and I've got the water inside. This is dependent demand. So if I say I have one bottle of water, really how many labels is that? How many caps is that? How many bottles is that? Right? So the dependent demand is what's a breakdown of all the materials to make one finished good. That's independent demand, this one thing right here. So another example would be, as I have on the slides, if I have a car, I have one car, but how many tires does it need? Well, it needs 4 tires because every car has to have 4 tires, 5 if you include the spare. And so the dependent demand for a car when it comes to tires is 5. So I've got 5 tires per car. That dependent demand, again, is dependent upon the independent demand. If I have 3,000 cars, I have 3 times 5, 15,000 tires. So hopefully that makes sense. That's the dependent is dependent on independent demand. Okay. Now, when it comes to demand, we probably should talk about the idea that there are different patterns over time. So in demand forecasting in particular, remember, I'm trying to predict the future, that there's different patterns of demand. Now, we try to do our best to understand those patterns of demand. For example, a bottle of water is probably stable. Regardless of the time of the year, bottled water always sells, right? So in the summer, it probably sells just a little bit more, but in the winter, it sells just as well. People like bottled water. It's fresher, it's cleaner, it probably is healthier than it would be coming from the tap. There's less impurities, there are fewer impurities, there's less fluoride, just healthiness, right? So we call that stable. Milk is stable. Toilet paper is stable. Bread is stable, right? Fuel, gas usually is stable, although arguably it could be seasonal too. But it's stable, which means regardless of the time of the year, it stays consistent. And that's that first graph on the graph line there. So stability. Second, as you probably know, is seasonality. So right now we're getting toward winter jackets and snow shovels and sleds and rock salt and things like that. They're going to increase right now because we're getting closer to the winter season. If it was April and we were getting closer to the summer season, those items would fall away. Demand wouldn't be nearly as high because we don't think about that kind of stuff at that point. At the same time, in April, your sunglasses, your sunscreen, your beach towels, your swim shorts, etc., all of those things, your bathing suits, are all going to increase because we're getting closer to the summer. So again, there's that seasonality. Regardless of the time of the year, a product will sell just about the same as stability or stable. If a certain time of the year is influential, then it's seasonal. Probably you already knew that. Not a big surprise. What you didn't know is that there's something called a trend. And that's the third one. And that is, regardless of the time of the year, it seems to becoming more and more popular. So certain trends happen and exist, which make us a little bit knowledgeable that something's going on, right? So people tend to be more and more impressed with the trend. So as a trend is increasing, what are products that are increasing now? What are some things that people are getting more and more into? And we'll use the example of 3D printers. There's a whole hobby market of 3D printing and what you can print with a 3D printer. And it's becoming more and more popular. People are getting more into it, right? The latest version of a phone, let's say it's iPhone 12, I think, that probably will increase in its trend. People will get more and more popular over time, right? LED light bulbs, of all things, right? It's hard to find other light bulbs, but people want LED light bulbs. Why? Because they have a 13-year lifespan. If you use it 3 hours a day, I think. Imagine putting in a light bulb and not having to change it every 2 years or every year. It'll last 13 years, right? So there are things that are trends. Now, there are also negative trends too. Things that were popular that aren't anymore. Like, for example, selfie sticks. If you remember selfie sticks, right? Still the fidget spinners, right? Things that were popular, not as popular anymore. It's tending going away. So it's a downward trend, right? I'm sure we could think of other things too. I would say UGG boots, but I think UGG boots are making a comeback. Denim as well, right? So there you go, positive trends, things that are making comebacks that are becoming more and more popular as opposed to less and less. And now if I take trend and seasonality and I merge them together, I get something called a step change. And this is really hard to think of. A trend that's increasing and becoming more and more popular, but still has seasonality. What are those things, right? So if I can think of swimwear, I can think of, I forget what they're called, UV lightwear, which is, even though you're wearing the swimwear, the swimwear actually prevents all the UV lights from getting in, but it still gives you a tan underneath, even though you're wearing a swim gear, right? Perhaps that's a seasonal product that's becoming more and more popular. So that would be considered a step change. Likewise, there are things that are going in the opposite direction too, things that aren't nearly as popular that used to be. For example, mittens, right? As we get into colder weather, mittens usually are pushed aside for the gloves because you want to have the flexibility, particularly as we have a cell phone device that we can touch. And we have some gloves now have the padding on the fingers where you can actually still use your gloves to touch on your phone and activate your phone so that it still works, right? So step change that are just, it's combining that seasonality and the trend together. Now, when we're looking at forecasting, we want to be sure about something called autocorrelation, which is the relationship between the current demand and a relationship with the past. Something happened that's influencing both. Usually, current demand is being influenced by information of the past, something that's happened in the past. For example, Right now, we are seeing an increase in store candy. Halloween just came and went. We just finished Halloween. Candy wasn't nearly as important or as big this year as it has been in the past. Why? Because fewer houses participated in Halloween. According to a study from the Wall Street Journal, last year, 38% of American households handed out candy. This year, only 25% did. Why? Because of fear of coronavirus. Because of that, the candy sales went down, right? Now, Christmas is coming. So candy sales will increase, perhaps a different color of M&Ms, perhaps a different packaging material, red and green, because the Christmas season's coming. Candy is still increasing, but because of that impact of people not buying candy because of Halloween and coronavirus, that candy producers are expecting that Christmas also won't sell as well, even though you don't hand out candy. But if candy wasn't a big deal in October, candy's probably not going to be as big a deal as it normally would be in December. That's autocorrelation. Because of the poor sales in October, we're probably going to have poor sales in December as well. So the past is related to the current demand. Just be mindful of that. When we look at our data, every now and then autocorrelation pops up. It means there's some sort of mistake or some sort of misreading we're getting because of that problem. Finally, we have what's called forecasting error, which is an unexplained component of demand. Sometimes things just change and we don't know why. It's something that we don't predict, something that doesn't even make sense. For example, we could have had a really bad Halloween season for candy, Hershey's and Reese's peanut butter cups and Hershey's miniatures and York peppermint patties, just not very popular again because of coronavirus. And yet in December, because we're not handing candy out, but we're having candy among friends and family that we trust that are inside our home, candy spikes. For some reason, candy just goes through the roof and we don't expect the forecast. It's like toilet paper back in April where you couldn't find any. Suddenly candy just becomes a big deal. Why? Well, we don't know. That's the unexplained component of demand. Something else happened, or people's mindset changed, or social challenges happened, whatever it might be. And wow, am I surprised. I don't understand why things are doing what they're doing, but we call that forecast error. It's an unexplained component of demand. We just don't understand. Now, why is all this important? Remember, we talked about that balance that we have with forecast error. Okay. The problem of forecasting is we want to be right on. We want to order or we want to make enough product to satisfy customer demand. But we don't want to go over demand either. And we definitely don't want to go under demand. I've hinted at this before. If you order too much, you have all this excess inventory, hence this picture, right? Too much stuff. It's got to go somewhere. And I increase my inventory carrying cost. And by the way, how do I sell more stuff than I can? So I've got all this extra inventory. I want to get rid of it. How do I do that? Well, I lower my price. That's demand management, right? We talked about that before. I lower my price and eventually I end up getting more people to buy my product, but I'm not maximizing my profit. Anyone that's ever sold on eBay can tell you that when you lower your price, you're not happy. You're trying to always maximize your profit, maximize your revenue. Plus, you've got that inventory carrying cost, this cost that I have of holding on to something. It's this play money that I don't actually spend, but in case my inventory goes bad for a sale, I can pick up and buy extra inventory because it's gone obsolete, because it's bad, because whatever it might be. Now, if I order too little, I've got the other problem. If I order too little, people want product, but I don't have it. And that's called a stock out. When you go to the store to buy something and it's not available and you experience a stock out, you're not happy. I wanted to buy this product and I couldn't, especially if it's on sale. Right? I wanted to buy this product and it wasn't there, and I get frustrated. It affects my consumer behavior. So what happens is not only did the company miss out on a sale, but they missed out on possible loyalty. Which means if you go to a store enough times and you don't find what you want, you don't go to that store anymore. Here's an example. When I would go to Target, I'm a fan of Target. I like going to Target, but I normally go to Target because I can find my shampoo there. I have a certain type of shampoo that I like and my family likes, and so I'll go there and I'll buy that. But the last 3 times I've gone to Target in Greenwood, they haven't had that shampoo. They have it available. They will sell it. There's a spot on the shelf that has the tag on it that says this is where it is, but every time I go, it seems to be out. It's gotten very popular, or the company Target just doesn't get it in. So guess what? I don't go to Target anymore to get shampoo. Instead, I go to Amazon, where it's a little bit more expensive, but I know I can get it, and it can be delivered in 2 days. Right? So there's an issue of customer loyalty. Every time I go to the store to Target to get shampoo, there's a stock out. And so I get frustrated. I'd rather just go get it on Amazon because I know I can get it and I can get it pretty quickly. So when you have forecasting error, you either order too much or too little. And we don't want either of those. We want to order exactly what we need to sell, because that way we can maximize our profit and we don't affect customer loyalty and we still make our sales. So this is the idea behind forecast error. Okay, so starting with what we have, first time we're making a product, first time we're selling something, how do we forecast? We don't have any previous data. We don't have any experience. So how do we go about forecasting and getting the right number? There's 5 different ways. And companies use a combination of these 5 different ways. So the first one, again, I'm making a product. Let's say it's I think in Business 101 last week, I used something called the baby mop, which is a onesie for a baby that has hair or strands of cotton on it, much like a mop, a dust mop. And as the baby crawls around on the floor, they end up picking up dirt and dust with it, which is probably a health nightmare, but still, it's a real product that actually existed and received a whole bunch of criticism. And so, if you're going to make baby mops, you're going to make new outfits, you're going to make anything that's brand new, how many do you make? And there's 5 different ways. And the first one is grassroots, which is inputs from those close to products or customers. Grassroots is going out and asking everybody, would you buy this? Would you, if I gave you this as a free sample, would you try it? Or maybe if I have a product that I'm going to sell, let's say a food item, SodaStream. So I'm going to make SodaStream. I'm going to sell products that taste like soda. Make your own soda at home. You have a station or a kiosk set up in the mall or set up in a retail store and invite customers to come over, try this. Would you like this? Would you think you would buy this? If it was $200, would you buy it? If it was $300, would you buy it? That's all called grassroots. I'm asking companies, or I'm asking people, potential customers, or people that have similar products, consumer reports, saying, hey, what do you think? Would you buy this? That's called grassroots. It gives me an idea of what the price should be, and it gives me an idea whether people are actually interested in the product. So that's one form of what's called judgment-based forecasting. I don't have any data, but I'm just asking people, what would you pay for this? What do you think of this? Etc. Now, a similar version, not going to the customer, but going through research and going through big companies, maybe this is more like Consumer Reports, is the fourth one down. It's called marketing research. Marketing research isn't necessarily going to the customer and saying, would you buy this? Marketing research is rather going through other companies, other industry level professionals, other consulting groups, and asking, okay, if I were to create a new pizza, a new ready-to-go pizza, ready-made pizza, like a Totino's or a Tortino's or a Tombstone or something like that, which ones are successful and why are they successful? Oh. Okay, so we have this from marketing research. Marketing research is kind of going through formal channels to get people's buy-in, to get ideas, what will work and what won't work. So grassroots and marketing research are very formal. Grassroots is actually going to the customers, and marketing research is going through the industry organizations, like looking at patterns of current customers, etc. All right, so those are 2 ways to get forecasts. A third one is executive judgment. It's the second one on the list. This is how executive judgment goes. And actually, a lot of companies use executive judgment when they're producing something for the first time. What this is a person with experience or a person with authority saying, how many of these do I need to make? Let's say 3,000. And that's it. It just is decided upon. This is kind of the power that we have, that executive judgment. There's an expert or somebody with experience or somebody with authority. It just says, we're going to try 3,000 and see how well it works. You know what? These baby mop clothes, there's a lot of criticism about them. I don't think we'll make a lot. Let's try 300 and just see if they sell. Let's make 300 of them. Put them in nice packaging, put them in with a nice tissue paper and see if people buy them. Is this something that's worth pursuing? That's executive judgment. A lot easier. Just one person saying, this is how many I want to make. And like I said, a lot of companies use that. Usually a CEO or a CFO or somebody of authority says, this is how many we're going to make. Now, similar to that, executive judgment is the last one. It's called the Delphi method. The difference between the Delphi method and executive judgment is the Delphi method is a panel of experts. So typically what I'll do, and I mean, we can try doing this here. Let's take a look. You guys have chat. Do me a favor and just in your chat, I want you to put in, what do you think the price of 87 octane fuel will be tomorrow? So what's the price of gas tomorrow? Right now, the price of gas, I'll put it in here. I got gas yesterday for $1.90, right? So if you had to guess, tomorrow was Tuesday, tomorrow's election day. So it's a big day. What do you think the price of gas will be tomorrow? Go ahead and put it in chat. 205 from Sam, 220 from Justin. Jordan says 209. Samantha 201. Anything else? So everybody's a little higher than me. 210 from Emma. Colin 202. Anyone else? 193 from Jacob. Good. Kate is 205. All right, so we're looking somewhere here. I'm going to put the average seems to be about 206 or somewhere in that range. Okay. You guys just did a Delphi method. You are all drivers. You are all panel of experts. You kind of know Tuesday versus a Friday versus a Saturday what the price of fuel will be. It goes up and down. Sometimes it goes up and down 50 cents per gallon. And you guys, as a panel of experts, just came together and said, here's what I think from the Delphi method what the price of fuel will be on Tuesday. It's a panel of experts asking everybody, people who are authorities on a subject, I deem you as authorities on fuel, coming together and be based on all of your recommendations. I'm going to take an average of that. So that's the Delphi method. Executive judgment is one person. The Delphi method is a bunch of people coming together and having that. So grassroots, executive judgment, marketing research, and Delphi method. We've covered those four. Here's the last one, historical analogy. You assume the past demand is a good predictor of future demand. For example, back to our Halloween candy, right? So if we have past demand from 2019, we assume that 2019's candy demand is probably similar to 2020's candy demand. Now, we may be wrong, again, because of coronavirus. This is a big national pandemic. Nobody expected last January, right? Or not January, last last December 2019. We knew that it was coming, but nobody knew it was going to affect us as much as it did. We expected it to be here for a couple months and then go away. But here we are 10 months later, and we're still talking about coronavirus. Heck, I'm supposed to get my test today, my test results today. So we're assuming that past demand is a good predictor of future demand. Or again, back to our Halloween versus Christmas candy, we assume that because of coronavirus, the Halloween demand wasn't very high for candy. So then Christmas demand probably also won't be as high because the past is associated with the future. Let's take a longer perspective, right? One of the things that happened after the pandemic, the Spanish flu of 1918, is that as people were getting back up on their feet, eventually World War I had ended. And what happened shortly after, we had a national crisis, a Great Depression. Right. So the Great Depression, people made a run for the banks. They couldn't get their money because banks had invested their money in other ways or other means. And so when people went to get their hard cash, they couldn't get it out. There was no physical currency. So assume that past demand is a good predictor of future demand. If we are experiencing a pandemic now, there's a possibility we're going to have a recession or a depression, much like the Great Depression of 1929. Well, let's take a happier thought. What happened after the Great Depression? After the Great Depression in 1932, people started making money again. They started having income. They didn't spend a lot. But if you had a birthday or you had a very big deal, something that was a big event that you celebrated, what did you do? Well, for years, you didn't go to a restaurant. You just didn't go because it was too expensive. So when people started having big holidays or big birthdays or anniversaries, what happened? People started going to restaurants once they had a degree of disposable income again. Chances are, after our pandemic, after our depression, our recession, if we have another downturn in the economy, what's one of the first things that'll pop back up? People will go to restaurants again. And again, as we've started lifting some of the restrictions for coronavirus, people are going to restaurants. Why? Because people enjoy eating out. Plus, it's a chance to bond with other people, to have family and friends there if you're celebrating a birthday or an anniversary or a graduation or something. So, historical analogy, this happened 100 years ago. Chances are it's probably going to happen again. After you come out of a recession, you have this. And indeed, this is what happened in 2010. After we had the Great Recession of 2008, one of the first things people started doing once they had disposable income again is going out to eat, albeit probably in the form of getting take-home food to go, right? But still, it's something that's there. So we can assume through historical analogy, this is probably going to happen again. So all these are 5 ways of doing what's called judgment-based forecasting. So we don't really have a number to focus on, but we can come up with a number through 5 different ways. So the first is through grassroots and asking customers. The second is through executive judgment, having a person with insight. A third is through historical analogy, comparing the past to the future or the current demand. Fourth is marketing research, going through a third-party company or some professional company and getting research, what's happening with similar products, what's happening to competitive products, et cetera. And the Delphi method is a panel of experts, just like you're my fuel experts about what gas will be tomorrow. Now, the last thing to go over, and then we'll start the math starting on Wednesday. Statistical-based forecasting is looking at statistics, it's looking at numbers, and it's based on information from the past. Okay, so we're going to look at the numbers we had generated last month, last week, or last year. And based on that, we're going to assume and predict what the future is going to be. This is what most of our forecasting is like. So most of our math problems are going to be like this. Time series analysis is looking at historical data arranged in order of occurrence. Recent is more important than in the past, the distant past. And we're going to predict what the demand is going to be. Causal studies is similar. This is linear regression. Causal studies says we're going to look for a cause and effect relationship between variables. And so the example we'll use here in class is the amount of consumption of ice cream based on how the temperature is outside. The warmer it gets, more likely that people will go out and get ice cream. Right? If it gets colder, fewer people will get ice cream. Although, again, that might be more of a stable product because a lot of people get ice cream during different times of the year. But causal studies are based on the temperature, we can kind of predict what the amount of ice cream consumption is going to be. Notice it's directional. Notice that the amount of ice cream consumption we have is not going to predict the temperature. Right. So if more and more people eat ice cream, the temperature goes up. Well, if that were the case, a lot of people would eat ice cream in December, because then we could assume that the temperature would be 85 degrees. And that doesn't happen in December, right? But it's possible that the temperature outside is what predicts the amount of ice cream that people eat. That's a causal study. The last one is called simulation models. And you may have done this, taken data, put it into a computer, and simulated what's going to happen. I used to have a piece of software that would create an emergency room, and you'd have people it would automatically run, and people by data would go into the emergency room. You'd see their little icons, and they would sit there and wait and see how long the wait time was before the nurse called them back so they can go into the emergency room and get worked on by the physician and the nurse. And did you have enough nurses? Did you have enough physicians? Assuming the physicians can get a break every 10 minutes or 15 minutes or something between different patients that they get. And eventually it was amusing because if you had enough people in the emergency room, they would fall over and pass out, and therefore like simulated that person was too late. You didn't help them fast enough. This is a simulation model. We don't do this. Routing, that we talked about in logistics, the actual loop or the stopping at customer to customer making deliveries would be a simulation model. We're not going to do simulation models in this class. We just don't have the time for it. But I'll start there. All right. Now, with that, it is 8:35. So I'm going to stop here and stop the recording. Here's where we are as far